There were several people in the crosswalk at 6th Avenue and West 4th, yes.
What was their reaction?
We all just froze and stood in the middle of the street in disbelief watching, and traffic stopped because we were in the way. And we just stood there for quite some time in complete disbelief of what we had just seen.
Where were you when the second blast took place?
I had managed at that point to walk the half block home, and I was watching the coverage on television, and that's when I saw the live picture of the second blast.
All right, Dan, thank you very much for giving us your thoughts. Here now, the President of the United States on this disaster.
Terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
Well, actually, President, before a moment of silence for the victims of this terrorist act, telling the nation that the full resources of the government would be brought to bear on helping the victims and on finding out who precisely is responsible for this terrible, terrible attack on our country. Right there you see the aftermath, the World Trade Center towers, smoke billowing out of the upper floors, all those floors, I'm sure, fully occupied. The rescue attempts going forward as much as is possible, given the high floors of the tallest buildings in Manhattan, and given the number of people there. Dave?
Jim, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you may be able to provide some historical perspective. How long have the Twin Towers been up, and once again, the floor height, the number of floors, I think?
Yeah, off the top of my head, somewhere in the 60s, as I recall, and it goes up, what, 102 floors or so, up to the windows on the World restaurant there.
And if we remember from the last bombing, it took months and months and months before that structure was certified sound again and re-inhabited by...
in from the bottom.
Right, that was a bombing from the parking garage level of the tower.
That is something that, it's hard to watch this, but it's more bearable, because I remember that particular bombing, and I was on the air all morning and all afternoon with that one, is that you saw the people that were being brought out on stretchers. You actually saw bodies and victims. And this, we're not seeing that yet, and we're hoping and praying that there are very, very few injuries. But just looking at this, it just, as you say, Jim, the carnage is just...
What we're looking at is just the long picture.
It would appear, Jim, as if there's more smoke coming from the ground.
And we just have another, yes, things have fallen to the ground and are burning. And we have another announcement now that you might have expected, and that is the Empire State Building is being evacuated. You're making the point, Lynn, that we are only seeing the long picture, if you will. We are not able to see, perhaps thankfully, inside those buildings and see what kind of devastation has been caused. We're told we have a pilot on the line, Richard Kornutik. Are you there, Richard?
Yes, I am.
Richard, were you up in the air when this took place?
No, I wasn't, but we fly alongside those buildings regularly on what they call the VFR corridor that goes up and down the Hudson River.
And did you see the attacks this morning?
Yes, I did.
What was your vantage point, and what did you hear and see, if you would?
Well, it appears that to fly an airplane right next to the Empire State Building or the World Trade Center, it's perfectly legal. You can do it under what they call VFR rules. And where those airliners apparently came from, it's really hard to say. And they may not have even been talking to the controllers. It's possible that they were hijacked either, quite a distance away, or no one knows where they actually came from. But the ability to fly right next to the World Trade Center has always been available to any pilot who wanted to exercise that privilege.
Excuse me, I just happen to live on the west side, and there's a regular route into LaGuardia that comes right up the Hudson River and then sort of banks right into LaGuardia. So it would not be unusual then to see planes flying near the World Trade Center, and as you say, Richard, it's not unusual. But these pilots must not have had any contact with the traffic control people or the FAA at all. Is that true?
Apparently not, because we've heard nothing contact with them. The airliners that come into LaGuardia, when they're over the and that higher corridor, they're at maybe 2,000, 2,500 feet. But you are also allowed to go down below 1,000 feet along that corridor. And one of the things they may have done is shut off on the airplanes. They have what they call transponders, which allow the controllers to identify particularly the aircraft. Mm-hmm. And they may have shut them off so the controllers could not actually see the airplane very well.
I see.
They would only have what they call a primary target, where it would be very difficult to track them. They'd have to go back and look at their tapes to see exactly where they came from.
Richard, this is Lynn Brown sitting here with Jim Ryan. You are saying that you are allowed to fly a plane that close to these buildings?
Yes.
Any particular type of plane? I mean, is a plane that big flying next to this type of building, wouldn't that seem a little out of the ordinary?
That would be unusual, because the airliners are all required to be on IFR flight plans, and they would not normally be allowed to fly that low. However, it doesn't mean that someone could, that would be absolutely unusual for a plane large planes to fly up and down the Hudson. But airliners routinely do not do that.
Richard, would you just stand by 1 second, please? I just want to tell the folks one thing, and that is the city fire department has now issued a request to all the members of the department, all firefighters, whether you're on your day off or whether you're on vacation. They're asking that you return to duty, that you go to your firehouse and report for duty. So the city is asking all firefighters, whether you're on vacation or whether you're on your day off or whatever, to return to your firehouse and report for duty. I'm sorry, Richard, are you still there?
Yeah.
Dave's got a question for you.
Richard, can you do me a favor and take us through exactly what happens as a plane takes off and circulates around that area? What contact they would typically have with the FAA or the tower at LaGuardia, Kennedy, or Newark? And exactly what would appear on a radar screen to those tracking aircraft in the area?
Well, let's say if you were taking off in a relatively small plane, say a twin-engine plane or a private aircraft, and you were coming in from the south, which apparently these came from. If they have specific areas, if you're coming in, let's say you were 20 miles out, there's no requirement that you be in radar contact with anyone or radio.
Now, Richard, I'm going to jump in. What if it were a larger aircraft? Because at least on that second hit to us, it appeared as if that was at least a twin-engine jet. What if you're a commercial aircraft?
Even a commercial aircraft is not required to always be on an instrument flight plan. They could take off what they call VFR flight rules, come up the New Jersey coast, and when they got within, say, 10 miles of New York City, they'd have to drop down below 1,600 feet. And VFR, they'd have to then drop down when they got to the Verrazano Bridge. Mm-hmm. They'd have to be below 1,100 feet.
My question is this. Would folks who are manning a tower, would personnel at the airports early on, or relatively early on, spot something alarming, that something that big was below a certain altitude or near one of these skyscrapers?
No, they wouldn't. If they came up from the south and they came up below those altitudes, even if they had their altitude reporting on, since they're below the level of where they control the airplanes, they wouldn't pay it any attention. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't have to, and normally it's not done. And realize that this is an extraordinary circumstance where apparently these planes appear to have been hijacked in some way. or taken the control over them, and it's basically must have been a suicide mission. Most of these aircraft accidents, when you look at them, most pilots can tell what really happened very quickly.